and welcome to the 7th episode of World War II History and Stories with Ron May. This is the second program, which is focused on the subject of children and war, a new section in my recently published book, Our Service, Our Stories, Volume 3. The phrase, "a date that will live in infamy," comes from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's speech to Congress on December 8th, the day after the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor. Explosions, damaged ships and planes, injured and dying and dead sailors and soldiers are iconic images from that day of infamy. Today, I'd like to introduce you to another image from that day. The image of a 7-year-old girl gazing up into the sky on that Sunday morning, seeing the planes, hearing the explosions, and asking her mom what it means. This is the story of Colette Rynerson. The day of infamy wasn't just seared into the memories of sailors and soldiers who were at Pearl Harbor on December 7th. It was seared into the memory of a 7-year-old Colette Rynerson who witnessed the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor. Colette and her mother had arrived at the tropical paradise of Pearl Harbor in the fall of 1941. She and her mom lived in a little house several blocks east of the ocean and 2 blocks south of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel near Honolulu. Colette loved walking to the beach. As it was so close to their house, her mother let her walk down there by herself. She was in heaven. Colette's father, Wendell, who was in the Army, had been transferred to Hickam Field at Pearl Harbor earlier in 1941. Mother and daughter had followed him there, moving from their home in Indianapolis. 1941 was a time of increased military presence on Oahu, as tension had been building steadily between Japan and the United States, both of whom were failing in their efforts to maintain diplomatic relations with each other and avoid war. The reason for such a strong military presence on the island, especially for the Navy, was the ideal port at Pearl Harbor on the south part of Oahu. In 1940, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt had moved the United States Pacific Fleet of Navy ships to Pearl Harbor from San Diego as an intended deterrent to Japanese aggression, which had been extending further east. That diplomatic upheaval and military tension was all in the distant background for Colette. She was a healthy and happy 7-year-old girl. She was enjoying the innocence of childhood while living on an island paradise. That paradise tranquility was shattered early Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941, as the Japanese conducted a surprise aerial attack on the ships in port at Pearl Harbor. Some 353 Imperial Japanese aircraft departed from 6 Japanese aircraft carriers staged 230 miles north of Oahu. The first wave of planes reached the island just before 8 a.m., and began dropping their bombs and torpedoes. "I remember looking up into the sky and seeing airplanes," Colette recalled. "Mother said we were being bombed, but the expression didn't mean anything to me. She tried to explain it to me." The reality of the attack quickly became more evident to Colette. "I remember a lot of screaming," she said. "Mother was screaming, and my father was on the phone with the Army Air Base and being recalled. That was the first time he had been with us in months, and he was called back. Dad was sent back to the base, and we never saw him again." Within 90 minutes, 18 of the Navy's Pacific Fleet of ships were sunk or run aground, and many others damaged. Dead and injured sailors were trapped in ships or strewn across the waters. Colette had a clear view of the destruction in the harbor. Many of the ships had been sunk. Others were listing badly. The ships damaged in the harbor were what I remembered most, she recalled. The whole experience changed her childhood in a heartbeat. From that point on, I was frightened, she admitted. At Hickam Army Airfield, where her father worked, 188 planes had been destroyed. The scope of destruction sank in even more for Colette, as she later saw the damage firsthand. "We went to the Hickam Airfield and saw where the hangars had been bombed," she recalled. The whole airfield was bombed. On both sides of the airfield, the planes were crashed. I remember thinking of death. Everything was destroyed. The loss of life during the surprise attack was even more catastrophic, as 2,403 Americans perished, and another 1,178 were wounded. Colette's father would likely have been one of those casualties if he hadn't spent the previous night with Colette and her mother. The tent he had been staying in on the edge of Hickam Airfield had been bombed and was in shreds, recalled Colette. His overnight stay with Colette and Marguerite, his wife, had spared his life from the attack the following morning. In the days after the attack, restrictions were imposed to defend against other attacks. Colette recalled, "We had dark blinds in all the windows and couldn't have any lights on in the house at night. I was waiting for it to happen again. I was waiting for every sound I heard to be more planes and more bombs." The experience was particularly difficult for Colette's mother, Marguerite, a native of France. As a teenager, she had lived through the bombing in Paris during World War I. The Pearl Harbor attack had a terrible effect on her. "She went downhill fast," said Colette. She was waiting for more bombs to fall as well. She lost faith in everything. She didn't trust people. She expected the worst to always happen. She expected us to get bombed every time we heard an airplane. Within a few months, the Defense Department arranged for families of Pearl Harbor service members to return to the United States for their safety. Colette and her mother moved back to their former house in Indianapolis and tried to resume their lives, while Colette's father, Wendell, remained in military service. She would not see him for the next several years. Colette attended Shortridge High School in Indianapolis and graduated in 1952. Having saved $1,000 from working part-time at the Indiana National Bank, she had enough money to take a vacation trip to Europe following her high school graduation. She spent 3 months traveling abroad and visiting 9 countries, including France, Holland, Germany, Austria, Italy, Belgium, and England. Everywhere there was evidence of the war that had finally ended. The images of such destruction, from Pearl Harbor in her childhood to Europe as a young adult, served as the bookends to Colette's formative years. December 7th, 2021 marked the 80th anniversary of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The years have only slightly lessened the memory and trauma for Colette. "I start having fast beating in my heart whenever I think of the commemoration of Pearl Harbor," she admitted. "The bombing is deep inside my mind. I had nightmares for some years about the Japanese being loose in Indianapolis. In my dream, I would go out and shoot spitballs at them," she said. Colette never returned to Hawaii or Pearl Harbor, but Pearl Harbor still sometimes returns to her. "I dream about Pearl Harbor and bombs coming down," she said. "I still have those dreams once in a while, even now. But now I don't wake up mad at the Japanese. Time, 80 years of time, have helped heal the trauma from the past. But for Colette and so many others in our nation's history, Pearl Harbor is remembered, and remembered personally. Colette was an eyewitness to that day of infamy that changed not only the history of the United States as we entered into World War II, but that changed her life as well. You can read more about Colette's story in my book, Our Service, Our Stories, Volume 3, and you'll find other children's experiences there as well. Tune in next time as we continue this focus on children and war, and I share with you the story of Eva and her harrowing escape from Poland. Thanks for watching.